This is an exciting panel. We've been talking about health and wellness and some wonderful research that's coming out of the universities and really in conversation around what's currently being done and what's needed in the space. And so this panel, we're going to touch on more of that conversation of exploring health considerations in esports and gaming. We have some amazing people with us today. If you could please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Summer Scott. I am the head of player development at Counter Logic Gaming.
Hi, I'm Dr. Caitlin McGee. I'm a physical therapist with a background in exercise science and neuroscience. I'm a co-owner of 1HP, which provides health and wellness services for everyone from casual weekend gamers to top-tier competitive pros, and I've been doing that for about 5 years.
Hi, I'm Michael Artris. I am the manager for the LCS and Academy teams for Team Liquid, so League of Legends.
Awesome. So with this topic, why is it important? Let's start with that. Why is it needed and why is it important?
Summer, you want to kick us off?
Okay.
Let's jam out.
I'm going to go for it on this one.
Let's jam out.
I'm really passionate about what I do. And I think it's really easy just to get wrapped up in the numbers about these kinds of things, but I'm here to put you on the ground with what a player really feels. And they are going after something so extreme and so great. They are looking to be in the top 0.1% at what they do, and they want it so bad. And can you imagine striving for that and just suffering the entire time? Because that's what I see. I see people suffer. Yes, you should see sacrifice, and yes, you should see strong commitment and some pain sometimes, but definitely not suffering. And I think that is why we need to care. We don't have an option not to, because you cannot see somebody want something that bad and just fail because their mind and body fails them.
Mm-hmm.
And coming at this from kind of the medical side of things with a bit of a background in traditional sports, I see absolutely no reason whatsoever why we shouldn't treat our esports competitors the way that we treat a traditional sports athlete in terms of paying significant and specific attention to what their demands in their activity are. I'm in agreement with some of the speakers from earlier that it doesn't really matter whether we call them athletes or whether we call this a sport. The important thing is that they're putting both physical and cognitive demands on their body that we can better train them to meet. That rather than dealing with pain that they expect to feel because, well, that's just what everybody else feels when we game, or, well, I didn't realize that, eye strain was actually a problem. I just figured that's what happens when I stare at a screen too long. I just have to deal with it. Providing that kind of degree of education that this is not something you just have to deal with, and in fact, you can be a better player and a better competitor for no longer having to deal with it. That's really just key to not only advancing this competitive esports sphere in the minds of the mainstream, but also just to making sure that our players get to keep playing at this thing that they are incredibly good at.
It's definitely important from a managerial side because with players especially, we want to see their careers prolonged. We want to see them have longevity in their careers. And as a manager, I want to see continued success for teams, right? For my teams especially, right? And making sure that the players are able to last as long as they possibly can means a continued career, continued success.
Definitely, and I think what's interesting too is, because my background's in traditional sports as well, and pivoting it over, it's you have to ask the question, are you successful because of or in spite of everything you've done? And I think what that does is it opens up the conversation to look at things through a different lens. And so how have those conversations been with your players or with individuals that you're working with? And then also, that's one side. And the other side of that is how have the conversations been with more of the coaching staff and the education?
Something I often ask my players is, are you surviving right now or are you thriving? Oftentimes when I speak to someone who's just well, I got 4 hours of sleep last night, but I'm fine. I'm well, yeah, that's true, you're fine. But are we after fine? So I think that's the really big statement that I think most players and coaches need to understand. You can get away with a lot, but peak performance is not about getting away with it. Mm-hmm. So that's the line that we need to draw.
We similarly build on that 70-20-10 rule that we talked about earlier, right? That there's this base of these are the things that you absolutely must do in order to have a healthy, successful base to play off of. And then there are kind of the above and beyond behaviors that you engage in or that your organization provides you with. There's no working around consistently not getting enough sleep or consistently not getting good nutrition or consistently not getting enough movement. You could take all the supplements in the world and use all the fancy gadgetry there is, and none of that will make up for those very basic deficits. Once we build off of those, then there are professionals and organizations in a position to provide you with kind of those above and beyond benefits. But if we're not helping players kind of get those very basic foundations down, then we're doing them a severe disservice, and they stand no chance of competing at the best they can consistently and over time. And yeah, they could get away with it for a time. You could, get jet lagged one night and still probably play fine the next day, but you can't do that forever. That will last for a time. And if we want our players to keep playing at top levels, then we need to be building these bases for them.
Yeah, when I talk to players, oftentimes they think that, oh, this won't affect me, mostly because they're young people and their bodies are, in the most part, good shape. But eventually, like, what they don't consider is the future, right? And that's what a lot of young people don't consider is like what's going to happen 10 years from now, right? And so when I'm talking to coaches, which is a little bit of a disparity there, they have been in the scene a lot longer, they've experienced more players, and the coaches definitely take the mental health and the actual wellness of the being really seriously because they've experienced a lot of coaches that I've dealt with have been in the scene for like maybe 5 to 10 years. So they've experienced lots of different players. They've seen different burnout, different injuries occur. Whereas the players themselves, they only know themselves. And so if they don't have anything at the current time, they're not thinking of the future. They're not thinking, oh, this is going to be something that may affect me. So they don't take it seriously. They think they can just kind of roll it off. So that's the conversations I've had at least.
Definitely. So for each one of your organizations, what's currently being offered as support, right? And so we have, from the coaching side, we have from the player development side, we also have from the outside contractor medical side. So you can kind of talk through what's being provided and how that kind of fits into the equation.
Yeah, I think one of the nice things for me about not being kind of just with one particular team is that I both have the chance to offer and to learn from all of the teams that I work with. I can draw from the knowledge that I gain experientially, and then I can also provide to players what I know through research and through what I know is successful for other teams. That's not to say that there is one single template model that's going to work for every single team and organization, and certainly not one single template model that's going to work for every single individual player. However, there are, as we've said, certain base structures that are going to apply to everyone, certain foundational skills which do transfer across organizations, individuals, different game titles. And so that kind of flexibility, that adaptability, and that desire to learn from as well as to teach our players, I think is something that an outside perspective can be really valuable in providing. I think it's also really essential, though, that we not just disregard kind of what exists within a team space. If you're coming in and you're working with a team as an outside individual, you are inherently less trusted than the folks who have been there for a long period of time. Players will not listen to me the way that they listen to their coaches, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't listen to me the way that they listen to their coaches because we have an entirely different relationship. That does also make it really important, though, that I not just work with players, but that I provide education to support staff about here's how you can better support your players. Here's the research that's available, but you're going to translate it into something that means something to your players. I could tell you, all day long that 6 to 8 hours of sleep is optimal, or that this particular macronutrient structure is going to be ideal for recovery versus for performance. But coming from me, it's just words and numbers. Coming from your coach, who is someone who knows you and who you should hopefully trust, it has an entirely different weight and an entirely different value.
Within Team Liquid, what we're doing to promote health, I think actually, before I go into that, I think when we're talking about health, I think a lot of people immediately go to like the physical aspects of health. But I think within esports, the most important part of health is the mental aspect of it. I think that's what we're dealing with more on a day-to-day basis rather than like physical injuries. And so within Team Liquid, we do offer some things to help out players when it comes to mental health and then also physical health. So mostly when it comes to mental health, we have a mental coach that we have on site that can work with the players closely with whatever needs that they are dealing with, whether that be burnout or any kind of just like side mental things that they're dealing with. The other thing we also offer when it comes to mental health, which is something that we found is really important, is separating the work environment from the living environment. I think we're seeing a trend, a lot more organizations are starting to do this now, where they're offering housing for players outside of their work environment. Historically, it's usually been organizations will usually house the players, and then also the players will play out of that same house, not being able to separate work from personal life. And that takes a huge mental strain, it creates burnout. And so we, a couple of years ago, started offering separate housing from the Alienware training facility that we have currently. And we've noticed that our players have definitely experienced a lot less burnout. They are a lot happier overall. Obviously, there still are things that they deal with, and that's why we have a mental coach to help out with that. As far as physical health goes, we offer physical therapists. We have a guy that comes in 2 to 3 times a week, works with players on individual basis, dealing on whatever injuries they may have. We take them to doctors and make sure that they're getting regular checkups and things like that. So we try to cover all of our bases. Obviously, there's room for improvement, but that's where we're at least right now.
Awesome.
So you guys have covered a lot of what is able to be provided, so I guess I can speak to how it's implemented.
Sure.
You can really start tacking things on when it comes to the extra services you can provide. You can bring in the massage therapist, the physical therapist, you can have a yoga instructor, right? You can do any number of things to amplify the training environment. But if you are really truly going to prioritize this in your organization, you have to really commit. For our organization, we found that because, as Parth mentioned earlier, most of the load is going to be cognitive load. And therefore, when you are looking at somebody who can modify the training and adapt it to what's actually happening to your players, you have to have somebody with the expertise and know-how to be able to do that. So as such, we've staffed our actual teams where the end decision maker is going to be the person with that expertise, which is markedly different than you may see somewhere else. They normally put somebody who is a strategic head in charge of how you train. But that is how you demonstrate true commitment to caring for really where your players will be hurting the most.
Definitely. Yeah, I love the distinction between the mental side and the physical side, and then also the how, like how do you implement that? And I think that's the first I've actually heard of that, and I think that's brilliant. Because really at the end of the day, it's about this global load management and understanding how it all fits together, then, you know, for that day, for that week, for the months, but then also reverse engineering. So when you think about the schedules of the players and knowing that there's this physical load and this cognitive load, what sort of things are being taken into account when you are working backwards from game day or looking at a season? Are there certain things that you're maybe setting up for heavier work weeks or less work weeks? I mean, how are you guys periodizing it in a sense?
I would say we do our best to be cognizant of where everybody's at. Part of the way that we've tackled this is that we are really good at monitoring markers of burnout. So we wait until that weakest link breaks, and then we start tailoring back training. Beyond that, I think overall, our total system really helps catch a lot of the things that would normally slip through the cracks. We have somebody who is a mental skills trainer in the room all day, every day with our team. Beyond that, players meet with me bi-weekly. So that if there's something that's happening inside the room that they can't talk about there, they have me to capture that as well. So if they are feeling burned out or they're feeling that the training is becoming overwhelming, there's just so many different ways that we can catch it that we're able to really quickly adapt.
Awesome.
Again, for us, a big part of it is education, both to the players and to the support staff, not only of what to look out for, but kind of what interventions can be a short-term thing, what interventions should be a longer-term initiative. We like to say that you don't rise to the level of your expectations, you sink to the level of your training. So whatever habits you have built, whatever routines have become easy and habitual, those are the things that you're going to use in stressful situations, like in heavy competition, like when you've got a series of several tournaments in a row, like when you've got a tournament, a flight, jet lag, and another tournament immediately thereafter. when we work with players at tournaments, which we often do, we'll set up kind of booths and vendor spaces specifically for top players, top eights. We don't do much about changing things there. We don't tell people to change their posture. We don't make any recommendations about the ergonomic spaces. We don't make any recommendations about you should start doing this exercise. We'll manage what concerns are happening on that day, and we'll set up a plan to talk more in the future. But if you come to a tournament and I change up a whole bunch of things about how you're playing, how you're sitting, how you're moving, and then all of a sudden you lose, you're never going to listen to me again, ever. If instead I bring your pain down, I bring your stress level down, we use some kind of on-site, in-the-moment management techniques, and then we set up a plan for the future. Okay, here's the warm-up routine you're going to do. Here's the cool-down routine you're going to do. Here's the quick little 2-minute thing you can do as a break between matches, between sets. Here's a journaling exercise you could try. Here's a breathing exercise you could try. It's not going to be the same thing for everybody, but it is going to be something consistent that works for you. And again, that goes back to that education component, both figuring out what's best for the player, figuring out what actually makes sense and what fits into their schedule, and figuring out, is there something that the whole team can do? Is this something that we can do to promote improved communication, improved social health, as well as improved physical and mental health?
For me, it's a two-part thing. One, it's carrying conversations religiously with the players, making sure that we're staying on top of it. There's a lot of preemptive work that we do on our side. We've had experience with players more specifically towards the physical injury side of things. We're making sure we're staying on top of that. So through experience, we're able to set up like a schedule for the players to make sure that they are not being burned out by what's going on around them, making sure that there's rituals set in place, and those rituals we stick to. Like you said, if we go travel internationally, we're not changing things last minute. We're making sure that they're comfortable mentally. There's a lot of things that go into that. The biggest, I think, aspect of making sure that the players don't experience like a mental burnout, especially, is proper time off. And it's really hard in this industry. Everyone's overloaded. Everyone is overloaded. And I think one thing that we've set going forward is we've had one specific day a week where there's nothing going on. We say no press, no scrims, take that day to do what you want. Just try to reset. And that's super important to allowing them to have that time to kind of just have that day of mental relaxation to recharge for the next day. So.
That's really interesting too, because there's a study that came out recently suggesting that the amount of total rest or downtime that you need to kind of withstand burnout pressures is that about 42% of your time per day should be in stress relieving activities. And that's not just sleep, that's eating a meal while not looking at a screen, reading a book, doing exercise, doing things that are leisure activities for you. Now, I can almost guarantee that I don't get 42% downtime in most days, if any. But it doesn't have to be every single day set up that way. It could be something like what you're describing, where you have a whole day this is a stress relieving day. These are the days that we are off.
Yeah, and it goes forward also it's hard to do that 42%.
It
really is. And so I try to help out with the players on every day. For instance, Saturday, Sundays are our game days, but outside of the games, we try not to we try not to do anything outside of that. So just games and that's it. Monday you have your days off, and then the rest of the week you work hard. You're not probably going to get the 42% of relaxation in those Tuesday to Friday, but at least Saturday through Monday you're able to try to somewhat reset. And I think that prolongs, here's a really good example. We dealt with burnout, really bad burnout in the summer split for us. And we basically were just okay, no more press, no more video activities, no more content, which is a big part of an everyday athlete's life, is that they have to deal with this. And it's actually very mentally taxing, what we found out. So we took that away, and we found that we were able to extend their interest in playing the game at a high level for that 9-week period, which otherwise we felt if we didn't take that initiative to remove some of those outside factors, that there was probably a chance that they would week 3 or 4 into the season be oh gosh, we have to do this again, we're going through the cycle. So yeah.
And something that we do that I think is really powerful is that we create the time to maintenance yourself. Not everybody wants to wake up early and come to a morning meeting, but as part of our morning meeting, we have gratefulness training as part of it. We have our mental skills training as part of it. We create that time in the regular workday so that people can start doing the things that they need to psychologically care for themselves. And I can guarantee you that given the space, you're going to have players that need it the most that will just not find the time. Even with a whole Monday, they're not going to find the time. And in the past, like, we've definitely forced that. Like, part of our yoga class was to force that because we knew that someone was just going to sleep in too late, not relax, and then play games until God knows what hour because they slept in late, and then they're going to wake in, like, sleep in the next day, and then their whole work week is ruined because they didn't know how to properly recover. So you kind of need to understand the players that you have, realize where they are in their life skill development, and sometimes you do need to do a little hand-holding to make sure that that active recovery takes place.
For sure. So with your experience with the player development, with the external advice and education, and as a coach, what is some advice you can give some of the users, maybe these aspiring pros, from a cognitive side? Let's maybe focus more on the mental side, because that seems to be like, it is very important. And oftentimes we kind of get caught up in the health. I mean, the distinction's great. It's like people think about health and wellness. They think, oh, it's push-ups and sit-ups. Let's talk about the mental side. What is some tips and tricks? And we touched on a little bit, but if you were to give the viewers maybe one or two pieces of advice, kind of coming through your path and what you've experienced working with the players, what would you offer?
Decide what makes you worth it. And what I mean by that is, at the pro level, you have players coming into a weekend, and you either win or you lose. That's always going to be the name of the game. And when you end up being the loser, you need to be able to walk away from that knowing that you are still worth it. Like, nothing crushes my heart more than when someone's just like, I am no longer worthy because we went 0-2 this weekend. I'm no longer worthy of fan support, no longer worthy of my teammate support, coach support, not even my parents' support, because I just didn't live up to my potential. And that is so sad to me. So figure out what it means to you to feel like your work that week was worth it. Just find whatever metric. I think Potter really spoke to it as well, where she's like, that was the one thing I really needed. I needed to have incremental goals that I can rest on to know that what I did was meaningful at the end of the day.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think a big part of kind of building a healthy sense of self, we talk a lot about the idea of self-care, kind of in modern society, about, I'm taking a bubble bath or I'm journaling today. And self-care doesn't just mean doing like these little fancy extra things for yourself. Self-care means building a lifestyle that you don't feel like you have to escape from. So that could be, maybe you build mini escapes into your day, not because you hate your life so much that you have to leave it, but because that small moment of quiet makes the moments of noise more enjoyable. It makes you feel more present in the moment, and you're able to actually engage with the people you want to engage with. Maybe the thing that makes you feel as though you don't need to escape from your life is something that you genuinely enjoy. And maybe it's multiple things that you genuinely enjoy, not just this game that is your obsession or your passion, but when it comes to the kind of correlation of physical and mental health, recognizing that there are things that you do movement-wise that you might actually enjoy doing. When we ask players to engage in physical health activities, it's not just because it's good for them, although it is, and it's not just because it can make them better players, although it can, and it's not just because it helps with mental health, although it does. It should be, at some level, because it's something they actually want to do. Which is why we don't go out mandating that all of our players, you must be a runner or you must lift weights 3 times a week. And yes, guidelines are great, but nobody actually follows them ever. I care far less that a player engage in the absolute optimal amount of physical or mental health or nutritional health or sleep health behaviors, and more that they find things that are consistently working for them. If the thing that you love doing is Zumba, go forth and do Zumba. If the thing that you love doing is rock climbing and that'll get you moving, do that. If the thing that you really enjoy is like sitting and reading, sit and read. But find the thing that is enjoyable to you, not necessarily defined by someone else, and that brings, I guess, the way that Summer talked about, that brings meaning and a sense of worth to yourself.
That was actually my point as well.
Sorry for stealing your idea.
No, that's fine. I was actually going to say it's really important that people find an activity outside of gaming that they enjoy, that they can back up on. Like a lot of the players that are at a professional level all they know is gaming. They've known it since they were 15, 16, and if they, like, to Summer's point, if they don't succeed, then they're going to be like, in their mind, they're like, wow, I'm a failure at everything I've done. But the only thing that they have done in that sense is gaming. So it's super important to be able to find activities outside of that and immerse yourself in those worlds when you need to. A good example that we've had recently is Double Lift has recently started going out and experiencing more like live music, concerts, and things like that. And he's actually a lot, I would say, a lot happier now as a person because he is able to not just have gaming, but also have like a social life outside of that, and kind of like it's almost assimilating into culture in a sense. You know, like gamers are very to themselves, and they don't have a lot of outside activities that they do. But I think some of them are starting to experience that, and especially like for Double Lift's case, right? He's able to kind of separate himself from the gaming, so he doesn't feel so burdened with the mental strain of just gaming alone.
You have to make your soul sing.
Yeah.
Like, that's like really the end of the story. If your soul is not singing while you are doing this, then we're doing it wrong. And it doesn't have to be on me, it doesn't have to be on the player, it's an us kind of thing. We are doing it wrong if these players do not feel like their soul is singing while they are pursuing their dream.
Right. These players got into gaming in the first place because they love gaming. If we're not providing the support that allows them to continue loving gaming and to be good at it, then we're not doing our job sufficiently well.
Amazing. Thank you all for sharing. Do we have any questions? Probably got time for like one question. Yeah.
So esports is obviously an evolving field, and esports medicine and health and wellness is also obviously evolving. And in the process of evolution, there are failures. And failure is often the best teacher. What is an intervention or a method that you thought would help, or that you tried out, and that didn't work out, and so that somebody else can learn from your experience?
So, lesson learned for not repeating the questions on the last panel. So the question is, lessons learned along the way that you can offer with the evolution of esports and health and wellness. More or less, yeah?
Yeah. What didn't work?
What didn't work?
What didn't work? That's a good question. I like that one.
Gonna offer you, at fear of just satisfying you, a general answer. Anything that felt like forcing it. When a player does not feel like at the end of the day they have some degree of autonomy, kind of to Caitlin's point about like you need to do what you love to do in terms of fitness, right? Anytime you make it so niche where there's only one line of success, it's a failure. It's going to fail every time. You may make one person happy, but make 10 others miserable. So I feel like that is like the biggest failure that I've learned from in the past in this position.
It's a huge balancing act, actually, because it's one of those things where it's like you can't force players to do things. I mean, you could. That would be unsuccessful for the most part.
It only looked like twice.
Right. You could force it, or you could let the players have all the say, but players are not going to know what to do necessarily, and then if you force it, they're going to have resistance against that. So it's always a balancing act between the two, unfortunately.
Kate, real quick, and then we're done.
I'm 100% in agreement that forcing it, that trying to impose an external structure can be one of the worst things. Because a lot of folks got into gaming because they didn't want the traditional, very structured path that a lot of us do take. And so providing that degree of autonomy and meeting them where they're at by providing that education so they can make choices along with you, that's really the only way to go about it. If you try and force the model, it's not going to work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. All right. Thank you.